My hands trembled against the microphone stand, but my voice came out steady and clear. I need everyone to hear this. The rehearsal dinner chatter died instantly. 100 faces turned toward me. Family, friends, people who'd traveled across the country to celebrate what should have been the happiest weekend of my life. The wedding tomorrow. I paused, meeting Ryan's eyes across the room. His smile faltered, champagne glass halfway to his lips. There won't be one. The silence was deafening. Forks clattered onto plates. Someone gasped. Ryan's mother, Patricia, sat frozen with her wine glass suspended in midair, her perfectly painted lips forming a small O of shock. "What are you doing?" Ryan's voice cracked as he started to stand. "I'm doing what I should have done months ago." My voice broke then, tears I'd been holding back for the last 20 minutes finally spilling over. "You just spent 20 minutes mocking the memory of my dead mother." His father, Richard, still had that smirk on his face, the same one he'd worn during his entire comedy routine. The same one Ryan had mirrored while laughing along. "And you're all still laughing." The words came out as a whisper, but in the silent room everyone heard them. My father was already standing, his face a mixture of pride and pain. My brother Jake had his fists clenched, looking ready to flip the entire table. They'd heard every cruel word, every vicious joke about the woman who'd raised me, loved me, and left this world too soon. Ryan's face had gone from confused to panicked. "Baby, wait. No." I pulled off the engagement ring, the diamond catching the light one last time. "I'm done waiting. I'm done pretending this is okay." The room erupted, voices raised, chairs scraped, someone shouted my name. But I was already walking toward the door, my mother's necklace warm against my chest, the one they'd asked me to remove because it didn't match the aesthetic. 24 hours earlier, I'd been a different person, a bride-to-be, nervous but excited, ready to join Ryan's family. Now I understood why my mother used to say the truth always reveals itself, usually when you need to see it most. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below, and stick around to hear how this nightmare began. 24 hours earlier, everything seemed perfect. But if I'm honest, I need to go back further, to when this fairy tale began. I met Ryan at Secondhand Stories, my mother's favorite bookstore. It was 2 years after she'd passed, and I still went there every Sunday, running my fingers along the spines of books she'd never get to read. That particular morning, I was crying in the poetry section, clutching a Maya Angelou collection Mom had loved. "Are you okay?" His voice was gentle, concerned. I looked up to find warm brown eyes and an understanding smile. Not the pitying look I'd grown used to, but genuine empathy. Ryan handed me a tissue without making a big deal of it, then simply sat beside me on the floor. "I lost my grandmother last year," he said quietly. "The grief. It hits you in waves, doesn't it? Especially in the places they loved." We talked for 3 hours that day. About loss, about healing, about how certain scents or songs could knock you sideways with memory. Ryan understood in a way my other friends didn't. He never told me to move on, or that she'd want you to be happy. He just listened. Our relationship blossomed slowly, carefully. Ryan never pushed, never rushed. He'd show up with my favorite coffee on tough days, sit through old movies my mom had loved, and hold me when anniversary dates left me shattered. His family welcomed me with open arms. Patricia would pull me into perfume-scented hugs, declaring I was just what Ryan needed. Richard would joke that I'd made their son less of a workaholic. Sunday dinners at their sprawling estate made me feel part of something again. The proposal came 18 months later. Ryan took me to Riverside Cemetery on a beautiful October morning, leaves crunching beneath our feet as we walked to my mother's headstone. "I wanted to ask her permission first," he said, kneeling beside her grave. "Mrs. Collins, I promise to love your daughter the way you would have wanted." Then he turned to me, ring in hand. Your mom would have loved seeing you this happy. Will you marry me? I sobbed, yes, feeling like Mom had somehow orchestrated this moment from beyond. The first hint of something off came at our engagement party. Patricia pulled me aside, champagne flute in hand, eyes slightly glassy. I'm so glad Ryan found you, she said, gripping my arm. You've been through so much, and now you can finally replace all that sadness with our family. Replace. The word stuck in my throat, but I pushed it down. She meant well, I told myself. She just didn't understand that you don't replace loss. You learn to carry it. Wedding planning started immediately, Patricia throwing herself into it with frightening enthusiasm. You need a mother figure for this, she declared, already pulling out binders and magazines. I smiled and nodded, grateful for the help. After all, planning a wedding without my mom felt impossibly hard. I had no idea it was about to get so much worse. Wedding planning with Patricia started as a blessing and quickly morphed into something else entirely. Now, dear, she said during our first official planning session, spreading fabric swatches across her marble dining table. I've already spoken to the country club about hosting. The Valencia room is perfect for a summer wedding. Actually, I ventured carefully, Ryan and I were thinking about the botanical gardens. My mom and I used to. Oh no, sweetie, too many bugs, and the photos would be terrible with all that harsh sunlight. She waved her manicured hand dismissively. Trust me, I've planned dozens of events. The country club is the only civilized choice. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. Mom knows best about these things, babe. The pattern established itself quickly. Every suggestion I made was met with a patronizing smile and a better alternative. My ideas were sweet but impractical, or lovely but not quite right for our family's standards. The flowers were our first real battle. I'd like to use forget-me-nots in the bouquets, I told the florist Patricia had insisted on using. They were my mother's favorites. She grew them in our garden. Patricia's nose wrinkled. Forget-me-nots? Darling, those are so funeral-like. We need roses, peonies, flowers with presents, flowers that photograph well. But they have special meaning. Death has no place at a wedding, she interrupted, her tone sharp beneath the honey coating. We're celebrating a new beginning, not dwelling on the past. The florist looked between us uncomfortably. Ryan was scrolling through his phone, apparently deaf to the conversation. Ryan? I looked to him for support. He glanced up, distracted. Oh, Mom's right, babe. We want happy flowers. Happy flowers. As if forget-me-nots carrying my mother's memory were somehow sad. The memorial table discussion was worse. I'd shown Patricia a photo from Pinterest, a small table with pictures of deceased loved ones, a simple, "We know you'd be here today if heaven weren't so far away" sign. Absolutely not. She pushed the phone back to me like it was contaminated. A shrine to the dead at my son's wedding? What would people think? It's not a shrine, I protested. It's a tribute. Lots of weddings. Lots of weddings aren't Patterson weddings. Richard had entered the room, catching the tail end of our conversation. We're not turning our reception into a memorial service. It's one small table. Where does it end? Patricia's voice rose. Next, you'll want empty chairs for the deceased, or those tacky butterfly releases. This is a celebration, not a seance. Ryan finally looked up from his phone. Maybe we could put a photo in the church vestibule? Compromise? I stared at him. A hidden photo in a back room was his idea of compromise? Your mother is gone, sweetheart, Patricia said, her voice softening to false sympathy. The sooner you accept that and focus on your future family, the happier you'll be. We're your family now. That night, I cried in the shower where Ryan couldn't hear me. I told myself they weren't trying to be cruel. They just didn't understand. Rich families had different traditions, different ways of handling things. But as I fingered my mother's necklace, the one thing they couldn't take from me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I always thought I knew who Ryan was. Compassionate, patient, the man who sat with me on bookstore floors and brought tissues for my tears. But as the wedding approached, I started to wonder if that person had ever existed at all. The change was subtle at first. At dinners with his parents, he'd speak over me, finishing my sentences with versions that pleased them more. "We're thinking of having the ceremony," I'd begin. "In the traditional way, just like you and Dad," he'd interject, shooting me a look that clearly said, "Not now." Alone later, I'd confront him. "Why do you become a different person around them?" "What are you talking about?" He'd laugh, pulling me close. "You're just stressed about the wedding." Wedding stress, his explanation for everything. When I cried about Patricia replacing my mother's recipe for the rehearsal dinner, it was wedding stress. When I got upset about Richard asking if my dress was modern enough for a Patterson bride, it was wedding stress. It wasn't until the inheritance conversation that I saw something truly disturbing. We were reviewing our finances, preparing to merge accounts after the wedding. My modest inheritance from Mom was listed among our assets. "What are you planning to do with that money?" Ryan asked, too casually. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Part of me wants to save it for our future children's education. Mom would have liked that." His expression tightened. "We don't need to earmark funds that way. My parents are setting up generous trusts for any grandchildren." "I know, but this is from my mother. It's important that..." "Important that what?" "That our kids know their money came from their dead grandmother." His tone was suddenly harsh. "Why burden them with that?" I stared at him, stunned. "Burden them?" "With the knowledge that my mother loved them before they existed." "You know what I mean." He backpedaled, seeing my face. "It's just, there's so much emotion wrapped up in that money for you." "Of course there is. It's literally all I have left from her." "And you don't think that's unhealthy?" Ryan's voice had that rehearsed quality it got when he was repeating his mother's opinions. "Always clinging to the past?" "Remembering my mother isn't clinging to the past," I said, my voice shaking. "Look," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "All I'm saying is at least my parents' money comes without the guilt, without the constant reminder of loss. Wouldn't that be better for our kids?" The room seemed to tilt. Guilt? Is that what he thought my mother's legacy was? In that moment, I saw him clearly. Not the man who had comforted me in the bookstore, but someone who found my grief inconvenient, embarrassing. Someone who wanted me to pack away my mother's memory like an unfashionable dress. "You don't understand," I whispered. "No," he agreed, kissing my forehead condescendingly. "I guess I don't." But the terrifying truth was, I was beginning to understand him perfectly. 7 days before the wedding, everything accelerated, like a mask slipping faster and faster, revealing the true face beneath. The Patterson family gathered for the final menu tasting at their country club. Richard was 3 scotches in, holding court with distant relatives. I sat quietly beside Ryan, trying to smile through discussions of floral arrangements I hadn't chosen and music I didn't particularly like. "Another thing to be grateful for," Richard announced, clapping Ryan's shoulder, "is that our darling bride is an orphan." He laughed, looking directly at me. "One set of in-laws to deal with instead of 2. Smart thinking, son." The table erupted in laughter. Even Ryan chuckled, though he had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Dad," he murmured, not cool. But he was smiling, and he didn't correct him. Didn't remind anyone that I wasn't an orphan, that my father was very much alive, sitting at another table because Patricia had separated immediate family from secondary guests for the tasting. I excused myself, hands shaking as I fled to the restroom. Orphan. He'd called me an orphan, like my mother's death was a convenience, like my grief was a punchline. That night, while Ryan showered, his phone kept lighting up with notifications. His brother Jason was texting rapidly, something about bachelor party plans. I hadn't meant to look, truly, but as I placed his phone on the nightstand, my own name caught my eye. I scrolled up, heart pounding. Jason. So is she still insisting on that memorial crap at the wedding? Ryan. Working on it. Mom's about to shut it down completely. Jason. Good luck with the mommy issues for the next 50 years, bro. Ryan. As long as she doesn't start crying during the vows again. So embarrassing at the rehearsal. I stared at the screen, nausea rising. I'd cried during our rehearsal at the church yesterday, overwhelmed by my mother's absence in a moment she should have witnessed. Ryan had held me, wiped my tears, whispered that he understood. But he didn't understand. He was embarrassed. I carefully replaced the phone, my world silently shattering. The next day, I drove to see my dad. I hadn't planned to tell him what I'd discovered, but something in his kind eyes broke my resolve. Dad, I whispered, I think I'm making a mistake. He took my hands in his weathered ones. Your mother would want you happy, sweetheart. That's all she ever wanted. But what if I'm not happy? What if I'm just afraid of being alone? His eyes filled with tears. Your mother wouldn't want this for you. She'd want someone who cherishes every part of you, including your love for her. Ryan says I'm stuck in the past. Dad shook his head slowly. The right person would understand that the past is part of you, not something to erase. I drove home with my mother's wedding photo on the passenger seat beside me, her smile a silent warning I was finally beginning to hear. The morning of the rehearsal dinner arrived with a knot of dread in my stomach. One day before what should have been the happiest day of my life, and I was walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around the feelings of people who showed no concern for mine. Patricia has everything under control, Ryan assured me, straightening his tie in our bedroom mirror. We just need to show up. I haven't even seen the final plans, I said. What time should I be ready to give my speech? Ryan turned, a strange expression crossing his face. About that. Mom thinks it might be better if you didn't speak. What? Your draft was… He paused, searching for the right word. A bit depressing. All that stuff about your mom watching from heaven, wishing she was there. It's bringing everyone down. It's how I feel, I said quietly. I know, babe. He kissed my forehead in that patronizing way that had become so familiar. But do you need to share those feelings with everyone? Can't we just have one night that's, I don't know, happy? As if my mother's memory was incompatible with happiness. At the venue, Patricia had transformed the hotel ballroom into a shrine to the Patterson family legacy. Photos of Ryan's childhood, his parents' wedding, generations of family milestones. But nothing of mine. Not a single image of my family, my history. Where are the photos I sent? I asked Patricia as she directed the staff with military precision. Oh, darling, she waved dismissively. There was a technical issue. The files were corrupted when we tried to add them to the slideshow. Such a shame. They weren't corrupted. I'd personally checked them the week before when I'd sent them. While helping set up place cards, I overheard Ryan's Aunt Jennifer talking to his cousin near the bar. At least she can't wear her mother's dress tomorrow, Jennifer whispered. Not quietly enough. Patricia said it looked like something from a thrift store. Can you imagine a Patterson bride in a hand-me-down? My mother's dress. The one I'd carefully preserved, altered, and planned to surprise everyone with. The one Patricia had apparently known about and mocked. An hour before guests were due to arrive, Ryan pulled me into a quiet corner. You look beautiful, he said, straightening my dress strap. His eyes fell to my mother's necklace, a simple silver pendant with a small diamond, the last birthday gift she'd given me before her diagnosis. Just one thing, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Mom thinks the necklace doesn't really go with the dress. It's throwing off the aesthetic. I touched the pendant, feeling my mother's presence in the cool metal. "It's my mother's." "I know," he sighed. "But it's just for tonight. Could you take it off? For me?" In that moment, staring into eyes I thought I knew, I made a decision that would change everything. I kept my mother's necklace on. The rehearsal dinner began with a champagne toast, crystal glasses clinking beneath the ballroom's chandelier. I sat at the head table beside Ryan, watching his father approach the microphone with the confident stride of a man who's never doubted his place in the world. "Welcome, everyone," Richard began, his voice booming across the room. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the union of two people, but the expansion of the Patterson legacy." My father and brother exchanged glances from their table, positioned conspicuously far from the center of the room. "When Ryan first told us about his new girlfriend," Richard continued, swirling his champagne, "we were concerned. After all, our son has always excelled at everything. Top of his class, captain of the lacrosse team, youngest partner at the firm." He paused for appreciative murmurs. "We wondered if someone from such modest beginnings could truly fit into our world." My cheeks burned. Modest beginnings. As if my mother's career as a teacher and my father's small business were somehow shameful. But look at her now. Richard gestured toward me with his glass. Almost unrecognizable from the sad lost girl Ryan found crying in a bookstore. Our son has always had a gift for fixing broken things. Ryan beamed beside me, squeezing my hand like his father had paid me the highest compliment. Patricia took the microphone next, her silk dress rustling as she stood. "A mother always dreams about who her son will bring home," she began, her smile tight. "And while I admit I initially pictured someone from our circle," she glanced meaningfully at several society women nodding along, "I've come to appreciate what our bride brings to the table." She raised her glass. "To upgrading the Patterson family with new blood, and hopefully many grandchildren who will carry on our traditions." Upgrading, like I was a software update, not a person with my own history, my own traditions worth preserving. "And now," Patricia announced, "a special presentation celebrating the journey that brought us here tonight." The lights dimmed, music swelled, and there on the massive screen appeared a montage of Ryan's life, baby photos, school portraits, family vacations, Patterson Christmases, Patterson graduations, Patterson milestones. I waited for my entrance into the story, the photos I'd provided of my childhood, my mother and me baking together, my high school graduation with both parents proudly flanking me. They never came. The 20-minute presentation ended with Ryan proposing, not at my mother's grave as he actually had, but at his parents' anniversary party. A complete fabrication. "Technical difficulties," Patricia whispered when she caught my stunned expression. "Such a shame about your photos." Ryan patted my hand absently. "They did their best, babe." Richard returned to the microphone, now visibly looser from the scotch. "And now," he announced with a grin that made my stomach drop, "I'd like to share some thoughts about our new addition to the family." Richard tapped the microphone, that smirk still playing on his lips. "I'd like to talk about what it means to join the Patterson family," he began, loosening his tie. "It's not easy. We have standards, traditions, expectations." The audience chuckled appreciatively. "When you marry a Patterson, you get the whole package, our connections, our name, our history." He took another swig of scotch. "But the best part of Ryan's choice? We don't have to deal with a monster-in-law." The room erupted in laughter. My body went cold. "Can you imagine?" Richard continued, warming to his theme. "Some controlling mother, always comparing how she would have done things? My daughter deserves better china. My daughter needs a bigger diamond." His voice rose to a mocking falsetto. Ryan was laughing now, nodding along. "Instead, we get the perfect situation. A bride with, what do they call it? No baggage. Richard gestured expansively. No competing holiday traditions, no fighting over whose family gets Thanksgiving. Just us. My father's face had turned to stone. My brother Jake was gripping his knife so hard his knuckles were white. Of course, we do have to put up with some quirks. Richard's voice dropped conspiratorially. Like the constant waterworks. He mimicked wiping tears. Oh, my mommy would have loved this cake sample. My mommy would have loved these flowers. People I'd never met were doubled over laughing. Distant relatives of Ryan's, business associates of his father, all finding hilarity in the cruelest mockery of my grief. And that necklace. Richard pointed directly at my chest, at my mother's pendant. She wears it like some kind of... What do they call those Catholic things? Relics? Like if she takes it off, she'll forget what mommy looked like. Ryan chuckled, glancing at me with an expression that said, "Just go along with it." But seriously, folks, Richard raised his glass again. We're thankful for our son's careful selection. A bride without a mother is like a boat without an anchor. So much easier to steer in the direction we want. Patricia was dabbing at her eyes, tears of mirth streaming down her face. Ryan's brothers were pounding the table in appreciation. I sat frozen, unable to process the deliberate cruelty unfolding before me. This wasn't an accidental slight. This wasn't a thoughtless comment. This was orchestrated humiliation. This was entertainment at the expense of my deepest wound. And Ryan, the man who had held me through countless nights of grief, who had proposed at my mother's grave with promises of understanding, was laughing hardest of all. Something broke inside me then. Something irreparable. As Richard launched into another anecdote about my excessive sentimentality, I felt a strange calm descend. This was who they were. This was who he was. And I finally knew exactly who I needed to be. Patricia rose from her seat, glass in hand, the perfect hostess ready to deliver the finale. Her eyes glittered with malice barely disguised as mirth. "Before we end this wonderful evening," she announced, "I have a special gift for our bride-to-be." She produced a small box, wrapped in expensive paper. Something to help with the adjustment period. I opened it slowly, aware of every eye in the room on me. Inside was a business card. Dr. Eleanor Wright, grief counselor. "For your unhealthy attachment issues," Patricia explained, loud enough for everyone to hear. "So you can finally move on and be the wife my son deserves." Ryan leaned over, his breath hot against my ear. "Maybe now you can finally let go," he whispered. "Tomorrow is about us, not your mom." The room had gone quiet, waiting for my reaction. Waiting for tears, for acquiescence, for the broken girl they'd all come to expect. Instead, I stood. My hands no longer trembled. My voice no longer wavered. "I've listened to you mock my mother's memory for 20 minutes, I said, each word clear and precise. "I've watched you laugh at my grief like it's a punchline to a joke." Richard's smirk faltered. Patricia's smile froze. "You've made it abundantly clear who you are tonight," I continued, "and I've finally realized who I am." I turned to face Ryan directly. "I am my mother's daughter, and she taught me never to settle for people who don't value my worth." "Baby, wait." Ryan reached for my arm. "It was just jokes." "No," I said quietly. "Jokes are funny. This was cruel, deliberately cruel." I placed my engagement ring on the table with a soft clink. "There will be no wedding tomorrow." The room erupted. Patricia's shrill voice cut through the chaos. "You can't do this. Do you have any idea how much we've spent? The embarrassment?" "The embarrassment," I repeated, "of having your true character exposed?" "Yes, I imagine that's uncomfortable." My father was beside me now, his arm around my shoulders. My brother stood on my other side, a silent wall of support. "You should be ashamed," my father said simply. "My wife would have welcomed you into our family with open arms. She would have loved you as her own, and this is how you honor her memory." Ryan's sister approached through the commotion, pressing something into my hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "They did this to his ex too. I should have warned you." I walked toward the door, head high, my mother's necklace catching the light. Behind me, I could hear Ryan's desperate explanations, his parents' outraged protests. But ahead of me was something better. Freedom, self-respect, the knowledge that somewhere my mother was proud. "You okay, sweetheart?" my father asked as we stepped into the cool night air. I touched my mother's pendant, feeling stronger than I had in months. "I am now," I said. And for the first time since I'd met Ryan, it was completely true.